The Law of One, session 15. This session talks about the 7 energy centers and the elder race. It's also a bit of a mixed bag. So it was a little, difficult to kind of pull out more significant topics. But I think those might be, the most significant, potentially. It's all significant. Okay, moving on. The questioner. I would like to ask if the use of the instrument is a function of the time we use the instrument, or the amount of information, or the number of words the instrument gives, the instrument being Kala. So is her energy depleted by the time, the information, or how many words are spoken through her? In other words, do I have to hurry and ask the questions, or can I take my time? Ra says, firstly, this instrument's reserves of vital energy, which is a product of body, mind, and spirit, is related to the length of time. We searched your group when we contacted you. Each of you has significantly more vital energy of the body. However, this instrument was tuned most appropriately for contact, and therefore we remained with her, Kala. Secondly, we communicate at a set rate, which is dependent upon our careful manipulation of this instrument. So we cannot be more quick. Therefore, you may ask questions quickly, but the questions but the answers we have to offer are at a set pace given. So they've basically considered whatever things they needed to consider that indicate to them the amount of time they take to communicate the information with the most clarity. And so they say that you can ask your questions quickly or slowly. We're still going to stick to the same pace because that's what works. Questioner, then I should ask my questions rapidly so that I do not reduce the time. Is this correct? Ra says, you shall do as you deem fit. However, we suggest that you use the time to ask clear questions, as in the past we have had to clarify questions. So if you ask quickly, you may gain more verbally, basically, but that time might also be spent on clarification later. So the questioner, why does rapid aging occur on this planet? Ra, rapid aging occurs upon this planet because of an ongoing imbalance of the receptor-web complex, which is basically something that is responsible for receiving and processing energy in the etheric part of the energy field of this planet. The thought form distortions of humans have caused the energy streamings to enter the planet's magnetic atmosphere in such a way that the proper streamings are not correctly imbued with balanced vibratory light love from the cosmic level of the octave. Basically, the energy is being distorted as it enters the planet, and so it cannot infuse light love as it should be infused from intelligence infinity. That is why you age rapidly. The questioner, is it correct to assume that one of your attempts in service to this planet was to help our people more fully understand the practice of the Law of One so that this rapid aging could be changed to normal aging? Ra, you assume correctly. The questioner, then it would be very beneficial for the people of this planet in practicing the Law of One to learn ways of service. Am I correct? Ra, you are correct. If you look at people at the beginning of life, you will observe a relatively youthful appearance. I expected this to go a little further, like for Ra to go into more depth connecting the above, but they didn't. So maybe this will be explored later. The questioner, what is the greatest service that our population on this planet could perform individually? Ra, there is but one service. This law is one. The offering of self to the Creator is the greatest service, the unity, the fountainhead. The entity who seeks the one Creator is with infinite intelligence. From this seeking, from this offering, a great multiplicity of opportunities will evolve depending on where each entity feels drawn to serve, which is connected to the programming of their energy centers. So some may become healers, some may become workers, some teachers, and so on. And that them deciding on what to become is basically, to my understanding, how their energy centers have been programmed. And that programming, of course, can happen at different levels, including from an ego perspective. The questioner: if an entity were perfectly balanced on this planet with respect to the law of one, would he undergo the aging process? Ra says, a perfectly balanced entity would become tired rather than a visibly aged. The lessons being learned, the entity would then depart. So once they complete their lessons, they'd leave or die. However, this is appropriate and is a form of aging which your peoples do not experience. The understanding comes slowly for us, and so the body complex decomposes more rapidly. Questioner: can you tell me a little bit about the definition of the word balancing as we are using it? Ra: picture, if you will, the one infinite. You have no picture. Thus, the process begins. Love creating light, becoming love light, streams into the planet according to the electromagnetic web of points or nexi of entrance. These streamings are then available to the individual who, like the planet, is a web of electromagnetic energy fields with points of entrance. So I think the same way the planet has its ley lines, I don't know if this is actually about the ley lines, but in the previous session we explored that is there a connection between these electromagnetic web points and the points of the ley lines crossing or meeting. And there was a connection, but this was an external exploration and not something that Ra revealed. So just to bring that in, the same thing exists in an individual. And so these points are then points of entry into the individual's body complex. In a balanced individual, each energy center is balanced and functioning brightly and fully. The blockages of your planetary sphere or Earth cause some distortion of intelligence energy. The blockages of the mind-body-spirit complex further distort or unbalance this energy. There is one energy. It may be understood as love light or light love or intelligence energy. The questioner: am I correct in assuming that one of the blockages of a mind-body-spirit complex might be due to an unbalanced ego? And this could be balanced using, say, a worthiness or unworthiness balance? Ra says, correct. Can you tell me how you balance the ego? Ra: we cannot work with this concept as it is misapplied, and understanding cannot come from it. I wish they would go further into that, to be quite honest. The questioner: how does an individual go about balancing himself? What is the first step? Ra: the steps are only one. That is, an understanding of the energy centers which make up the mind-body-spirit complex. This understanding may be briefly summarized as follows. The first balancing is of the Malkuth or Earth vibratory energy complex called the red ray complex. Malkuth is a word from the Kabbalistic tree of life. At the bottom of the tree, or the bottom sephira as used in the Kabbalah. They only use it here. It's not, there are no other words from the Kabbalah that are brought into this. So I'm curious about the relationship between the Kabbalah and what Ra is explaining. But nonetheless, and so an understanding and acceptance of this energy is fundamental. The next energy complex, which may be blocked, is the emotional or personal complex, also known as the orange ray complex, which through Eastern understanding we call the sacral or the sacral chakra. This blockage will often demonstrate itself as personal eccentricities or distortions with regard to self-conscious understanding or acceptance of self. The third blockage resembles most closely the ego. It is the yellow ray or solar plexus center. Blockages in this center will often manifest as distortions toward power manipulation and other social behaviors concerning those close and those associated with the person, with the mind-body-spirit complex. Those with blockages in these first three energy centers or nexi will have continuing difficulties in ability to further their seeking of the law of one. So I see here that he is calling these energy centers the nexi, or as explained further above. One sec, let me just find it. The electromagnetic web of points for the individual. I actually forgot about this as I was writing it. I imagined it to be with more subtle points, although I guess there are many chakras, and these are just the major ones, but I guess these are the major points of entry. Yeah, so he says that blockages in these first three will have continuing difficulties in ability to further their seeking of the law of one. The center of the heart, or the green ray, is the center from which third density beings may springboard, shall we say, toward intelligent infinity or infinite intelligence. Blockages in this area may manifest as difficulties in expressing what you may call universal love or compassion. A very significant one for me. I was doing a breath work a few years ago, and I, used the chakras at the time. I wasn't I wasn't into energy healing or any of that sort of thing. I didn't even believe in any of that stuff. I just used chakras as a map of consciousness to bring my awareness to different points or different areas of my beingness, I guess, to use a broad term, because I didn't know where to begin with my healing journey, and that seemed like the most logical thing. It also presented itself and it made sense to me, and I was kind of going through the motions with each of these energy centers. The root, realized how completely ungrounded I was at the time. The sacral, completely blocked emotionally. The solar plexus, completely not within any relationship to personal power or drive or will. I kind of moved through each of those relatively effortlessly. When I came to the heart, it was a meditation on forgiveness and acceptance, and it was like, no can do. You're asking for too much here. This is too much. And it was the first moment where I felt like I really had to put the bags down. Everything else was like, okay, I can do this. But coming to the heart and starting to deal in forgiveness and compassion and acceptance, and it was like, it was too much. It took me a couple of days. Eventually I came back to it and I bawled my eyes out from the depths of my soul. But it was the first real moment of deciding to heal. Everything else was just, an attempt to survive. This was like, I'm deciding to go to the next level. And from that point on, it just like the doors just blasted open. I did a breath work within the same month, and I remember my heart blasting open to the point of this unconditional love flowing out of me. I felt like I was a fountain, and I had no experiences in this stuff before. So I didn't have terminology, but I knew it was love. And it surrounded the entire planet. I was laying on my yoga mat on the floor, blasted out of me, surrounded the entire planet. And from, at that moment and for a good couple of months after that, there was just unconditional love for everything, for everyone. No judgment, no competition, no, all of that had just collapsed. The heart is really, truly a powerful springboard. Anyway, he continues on that one, saying that blockages in this area may manifest as difficulties in expressing what you may call universal love or compassion. The blue ray center, or the throat, of energy streaming is the center for which, for the first time, is outgoing as well as inpouring. Though I don't also fully understand what he means by that. Something being outgoing and inpouring. I thought they all were outgoing and inpouring. But I don't recall a clarification on that in this session. I'll continue. You're welcome to share in the comments if you have some thoughts on that. Those blocked in this area may have difficulty in grasping the spirit-mind complexes of its own entity, so myself, and further difficulty in expressing such understandings of self. Entities blocked in this area may have difficulties in accepting communication from other mind-body-spirit complexes. Again, with this one I really felt the shift, as well as with the sacral. I started painting and dancing and writing poetry. It was really outside of the stuff that I had been doing, some never, and some that had just kind of been dormant for a long time. But with the throat, I was really terrified of judgment. So everything that I'd posted online in the past was like so careful. The caption would be so limited to, nothing that could be misunderstood. So as short as possible, as little information as possible. And if there was a picture, it was also, carefully considered so that there was no potential for judgment. Terrified. But when I started working on this, this is when I started sharing all of this stuff, and I started on Instagram. But I just couldn't contain it. It had to be shared. And so I really got curious about, man, maybe there's something else going on here. Either I'm just reprogramming my subconscious mind, or there is some energetic thing happening here as well. The next center is the pineal or indigo ray center. Those blocked in this center may experience a lessening of the influx of intelligent infinity, or intelligent energy, due to manifestations which appear as unworthiness. Now, this is a big one, this unworthiness. This is that of which you spoke in the past. As you can see, this is but one of many distortions due to the several points of energy influxes in the mind-body-spirit complex. Yeah, that unworthiness thing. Do you feel worthy of even loving yourself? Never mind love from others. Do you feel worthy of being heard? Never mind the judgment element. This worthiness thing is really, it's sneaky. I mean, they're all kind of sneaky, but you think of worthiness as something more broad and general and material almost. But it really runs really deep. Balancing the indigo ray is central to the work involving the spirit complex, which involves the transformation or transmutation of third density to fourth density. So it being the energy center, receiving the least distorted outflow of love light from intelligent energy, and having the potential for the key to the gateway of intelligent energy previously, apologies. Basically, if you can, balance this one, this is what allows you to move to the next density. It's also what allows you to have access to intelligent infinity. or the eighth, what does he call it? The eighth level, or the octave. The Akashic records as well, as previously mentioned. The remaining center of energy influx is simply the total expression of the entity's vibratory complex of their mind, body, and spirit. So basically your vibe is what determines the crown. It is as it will be, balanced or imbalanced. It has no meaning at this energy level, for it gives and takes in its own balance. Whatever the distortion may be, it cannot be manipulated, as can the others, and therefore has no particular importance in viewing the balancing of an entity. So you don't need to work on your crown chakra, just work on the other 6. The crown just reflects what's going on in the other 6. The questioner. You previously gave us some information about what we should do in balancing. And they highlight that this was session 5 on becoming the healer. Is there any information that we can publish now about any particular exercises or methods of balancing these centers? Ra, the exercises given for publication, seen in comparison with the material now given, are in total a good beginning. So I imagine that the group might have been publishing some helpful articles before they released this book. So I think that might be what Ra is referring to. It is important to allow each seeker to enlighten itself, rather than for any messenger to attempt in language to teach learn for the entity, thus being teach learner and learn teacher. This is not in balance with your third density. We learn from you, we teach you. Thus, we teach learn. If we learned for you, this would cause an imbalance of free will. So you can't do it for anybody. You know, as compassionate beings, as loving healers of the planet, I'm sure you know the feeling of going through a process and realizing, man, this was powerful. I feel completely free of this knot in my psychology, in my energy field, in my body, in my manner, in my beliefs. I was able to release this thing. This was so powerful. I really want to share it with the next person. And the next person is the one that is either closest to you, you know, mentally, emotionally, and they don't have an interest. And the frustration begins. And I mean, it's so clear that you can take a horse to water, but you cannot make it drink. You can't learn for people. Though we may have the desire to do so, they have to pick up the reins. There are other items of information allowable, continuing with Ra. However, you have not yet reached these items in your lines of questioning, and it is our belief or feeling complex that the questioner shall shape this material in such a way that your mind, body, spirit complexes shall have entry to it. Thus, we answer your queries as they arise in your mind complex. So Ra is basically just saying we trust you to ask as you deem fit, so that humans are able to access this information through the manner that you've questioned. Ra, or the questioner, yesterday you stated the harvest is now. There is not at this time any reason to attempt to extend your lifespan. In other words, it came up before, don't try to extend your lifespan because you don't have time to do so, but rather to encourage you towards the heart of self. This resides in the violet ray energy field and will determine the harvest of each mind, body, spirit complex. Could you tell us how to seek, or the best way to seek, the heart of self? Ra says we've given you this information in several ways in session 10 and the energy centers that were mentioned above. But a brief recap: the understanding, experiencing, accepting, and merging of self with self and with other self, and finally with the Creator, is the path to the heart of self. In each tiny part of yourself resides the one in all of its power. They talk about that understanding, experiencing, accepting in session 5 as well. I think it's 4, 5, potentially the beginning of 6. It's all the healing sessions. Therefore, we can only encourage contemplation along these lines, always stating the prerequisite and importance of meditation, contemplation, or prayer as a means of subjectively and objectively using or combining various understandings to enhance the seeking process. So in other words, don't just read the material. You need to sit down and actually meditate on it, to contemplate on it, or to contemplate it, to pray on it. And this basically will allow it to sink in more deeply, he mentioned in a previous session. So without such a method of reversing the analytical process, one could not integrate into unity the many understandings gained in such seeking. I made a little note here on this. I'm just going to read the note that I made. Something I never felt drawn to was one path, being called one thing or learning from one school of thought. And I used to wonder if this would harm me or support me. Harm, inverted commas, because you could get lost and end up somewhat confused, as he's mentioned before. Support me because I wouldn't have to unlearn or release another stronghold of identification like my Christian upbringing, for example. Though there are many useful tools for understanding and learning, even in Christianity, so I don't want to discard that. There's a lot of gold in there as well, I believe. But something I did realize was the usefulness of the subjective experiences which required the dropping of the intellectual mind. For me, the experience of that was to let go of the need or the desire to know. Let go of the desire for knowledge. Let go of all the knowledge that had been accumulated up to that point. Let go of every belief, every story. That letting go was what allowed me to, I guess, sink back and go beyond the experience of the limited self with regard to this physical reality and the ego self. It was through that letting go. So to me, that is the subjective experience. The objective experience was then the intellectual mind, kind of stepping in later to integrate the teach learning, as Ra says, or the learn teaching. Was through that experience, allowing the guru, the teacher, the God within, to basically be the guide to the little self. And the intellectual mind was useful in this regard. So yeah, the questioner. Yesterday you also mentioned that when there was no harvest at the end of the last 25,000 year period, there were harvestable entities who shall choose the manner of their entrance into the fourth density. Can you tell me what you mean by how they will choose the manner of their entrance into the fourth density? Ra says, these shepherds, or the elder race, shall choose the time space of their leaving. They are unlikely to leave until their other selves are harvestable too. If you remember from a previous session, they talked about how some people were ready for harvest, but they decided to stay and help others who were not ready to become more ready. And so they were sacrificing themselves. I think he also referred to them as sorrow something. I can't remember the exact term. The questioner, what do you mean by their other selves being harvestable? Ra, the ones who weren't ready for harvest, that they chose to remain here for. The questioner, could you tell me just a small amount of the history of what you call the elder race? Ra, your question's unclear. Please restate. Questioner, I asked this question because I've heard about the elder race before in a book. Road in the Sky is the name of the book by George Hunt Williamson. And I was wondering if this elder race was the same that he talked about. Ra, The question now resolves itself, for we have spoken previously, session 14 and 15, of the manner of decision-making which caused these entities to remain here upon the closing of the second major cycle of your current master cycle. So it's the same people from before that stayed to help. And then he goes on to explain, there are some distortions in the description of the one known as Mikhail Dubronovic, also known as George Hunt Williamson. However, these distortions have primarily to do with the fact that these entities are not a social memory complex, but rather a group of mind-body-spirit complexes dedicated to service. So basically that was the distinction between the two. The one is a social memory complex, the other a mind, correction here. Give me a second, let me understand this better. He's referring to the description. Sorry, I lost my train of thought when I mentioned his name, trying to pronounce his actual last name. He's saying that the descriptions of the author were incorrect, that they were not a social memory complex, that rather they are instead a group of mind-body-spirit complexes dedicated to service. That these entities work together but are not completely unified. Thus, they do not completely see each other's thoughts, feelings, and motives. However, their desire to serve is the fourth dimensional type of desire, thus melding them into what you may call a brotherhood. I hope that was clearer. What do you call, or why do you call them the elder race? We call them thusly to acquaint you, the questioner, with their identity as is understood by your mind. So, yeah, the way humans understand it, elder race resonates. Questioner, are there any wanderers with these elder race or not? Ra, there are planetary entities harvested, wanderers only in the sense that they chose in fourth density love to immediately reincarnate in third density rather than proceeding toward fourth density. This causes them to be wanderers of a type. Wanderers who have never left the earth plane because of their free will, rather than because of their vibrational level. So in other words, true wanderers in the way that Ra describes it are entities from a higher density who incarnate in third density to help raise the consciousness of the planet. But these are not coming from a higher density. They are ascending to a higher density, but they choose to remain here even though they have not left at any point. Interesting. Questioner, well, in yesterday's material you stated, we offer the law of one, the resolving of paradoxes. You also mentioned earlier that the first distortion I meant was the distortion of free will. Could you tell me if there's a sequence? Is there a first, second, third, fourth distortion of the law of one? I've actually had a curiosity about this as well. Here is the answer. Only up to a very short point. After this point, the manyness of distortions are equal one to another. The first distortion is free will. It finds focus. This is the second distortion known to you as Logos, the creative principle, or love. This intelligent energy thus creates a distortion known as light, which is the third distortion. So the first, free will; second, love; third, light. From these three distortions come many, many hierarchies of distortions, each having their own paradoxes to be synthesized, no one of them being more important than any other. Questioner, you also said that you offered the law of one, which is the balancing of love-light and light-love. Is there any difference between love-light and light-love? Ra, this will be the final question. There is the same difference between love-light and light-love as there is between teach-learning and learn-teaching. Love-light is the enabler, the power, the energy giver. Light-love is the manifestation which occurs when light has been impressed with love. Let that sink in for a second. Which density did we come from? This is a final short question from the questioner. Ra, I scan each and find it acceptable to share this information. The wanderers in this working, or in this group, are of two densities. One, the density of 5, that is, of light. One, the density of love light or unity. To express the density of which came from which density, we observe to be an infringement upon the free will of each. Therefore, we state simply the two densities, both of which are harmoniously oriented towards work together. And then in Ra's famous style, I've actually never ended any of these off with this, but I'm gonna in this session. I am Ra. I leave you in the love and the light of the infinite creator. Go forth then, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one infinite creator, Adonai.